Welcome to Small Business Big Visibility. I'm really excited to bring David Daniel here. He is a husband, a father. He spent over 20 years in the nonprofit space, has lived in China for 7 years, speaks Chinese, and used to speak Spanish, as I understand. He started multiple businesses, and now he's going to share his story and wisdom with us. David, how did you get into the nonprofit world?
I actually jumped into it pretty much right out of college. So it was an organization both my wife and I were involved in, and we decided, hey, let's do this for 1 year before I go and use my computer science degree. And yeah, that that ended up take going on for a little longer than a year. Ended up for
That's a long year.
it is a long year. Yeah. It's a 6,000 day year.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, it was but it's kind of like a lot of those things, whether in life or business, that you take a step with what you know, and then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh wow, we that was a different path, but not that doesn't necessarily mean bad. Just a little different along the way.
For sure. And give some insight into what it was like working for a nonprofit, if you would.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, I mean, it was a lot of fun, and even now, like I said, when I look back,
Mhm.
and I remember when that season was ending, I'm like, oh, how does this translate? And really, like, what's cool is at first I didn't really know how to answer that question, but in looking back, I realized like all along the way, I really loved finding good people who were doing good things, and then it was like, okay, how do I help them win? And then as I transitioned into what more of what I do now, that same narrative, that same element holds true all the way through. But no, I mean, one of the big great things about working in the nonprofit space is the finding good people who are doing good things, which obviously exists in the for-profit as well. But just love seeing the impact. Got to see how that looked in a diverse number of different spaces, working directly with people, working organizationally, and eventually found myself in a leadership role within our creative department that served all these different other departments and divisions and subsidiaries and such. And so it's kind of like running an internal marketing agency in some ways, which was a blast. Helping all these other people, all these other departments who are doing great things, helping them win. Um, but yeah, it was a lot
So
of fun
how do
because
you
you get to
go
see the
from an
impact.
IT background to running an internal marketing
That's
organization?
that's a good question. It was again not a linear journey.
Hmm.
It was a much more circuitous one. But in between there, actually, I did a lot of experience design of designing like large scale 1,000 person experiences, both like in person but online, and kind of pulling a lot of that together. And so really like through that, if you think about it, designing an experience, whether it's small with like 50 or 100 people, or big with thousands, you're creating experience, which is to a large degree what you're doing in marketing. It's what you're doing in design. Is you're designing experience. You're thinking about all the touch points and the interactions and the motivations and the outcomes. And so even though, yeah, on paper it looked really different, it actually translated very much into the um, same kind of actions, where like in an event, you're like, well, why do we want to have workshops? Like, what function does this serve? In like, why do these people come to this event? What are they hoping to get out of it during the time? How are they hoping to be different? Well, why have workshops? Just because we've always had them, or what purpose do they serve? What function do they serve? And then, the same thing in helping somebody market something where they're like, oh, I need a YouTube video. And it's like, well, why? Like, what's not true now that you hope is true when YouTube video exists? And really, and they're like, well, because I don't have one. It's like, okay, that's not an answer. That is an answer. It's not a great answer. And so helping people really
Technically
think
true,
through,
though.
it is technically true. Yes, that's why I qualified. And it is actually an answer. But then yeah, helping them really think through. It's like, hey, what's the outcome that you want here, and let's work backwards
Mm.
from this. And so that's where, yeah, it kind of shifted and really found my sweet spot of both helping those teams, because we had four different creative teams. Stepped into that role actually in the beginning of 2020. And the person I was leading with, we were having a discussion of whether or not you could have distributed creative teams. And so could you have a virtual team? And there was, we disagreed on it, but we got to test that very quickly. The pandemic came. It's like, well, I guess we'll find out. And it ended up actually working really well and helping shape those teams, but also help them make that impact through what we created. So
Right.
Um,
And so after all that pandemic and you've had all that experience and your nonprofit time was kind of winding down,
mhm.
did you already have something that you were going to land into when you left the nonprofit world, or were you stepping
I
out into the cold?
A little of both. I had been thinking about it, but it did kind of how a lot of times those things where you're like, oh, is this going to come? Is this going to happen? And all of a sudden it's like it's real quick. It seems forever, and then it comes quick. But it was actually in serving all those other different parts of the organization. I realized I was like, well, hey, who helps the nonprofits that don't have a global entity behind them? Like, who helps the person who's serving, in the inner city or in the jungle or anywhere in between,
Yeah.
and like just has a very like focused impact that they're wanting to have. Who helps those folks? And in the same way, like who helps the small businesses that don't have a corporation behind them, to that don't have a creative department,
Right.
behind
Yeah.
them. And because even part of my backstory growing up, my mom and my stepdad owned a furniture store when I was a kid. So like
Mm.
growing up, riding in the back of the van, holding up an armoire and a dresser, and I was like the straps basically, because that's how things rolled in the 80s. But yeah, like going through that time, really thinking like, well, hey, who helps all of these smaller entrepreneurs, whether regardless of their tax status, whether they're for profit or not for profit, who
Yeah.
helps these folks. And so began really looking at that, and then just kind of the right opportunity came up, and stepped out to take on a couple different fractional roles, actually, with a few different, one with a startup, one with an established company, kind of right out of the gate, and got to really help both of those. And at kind of right on the backside of that, started my own company, Better Story Marketing, at that time.
Mhm.
And really started that with the intent to help. How do we help purpose driven small nonprofits or small businesses get started and grow?
Yeah. And transitioning out of nonprofit into that new entrepreneurial space, was that difficult or was it a pretty easy transition? Was it a huge mindset shift or did a lot of it
Yeah.
translate over for you?
A lot of it did translate over. There were definitely probably some, like when you said mindset shifts, it made me think about that. I think there were definitely some like probably limiting beliefs in there about like even the way you think about money and budget and abundance or scarcity. Like there's some of that I think I had to kind of reprogram in my mind, coming from the nonprofit space, and then kind of seeing like, well, hey, what is the value of my work? What will people pay for it? And that happens even when you come out of a corporate space and you're trying to figure out, what do I charge, if you're as you're starting out. So there's definitely some of that, but
Hmm.
at the same time, a lot of nonprofits, there is kind of an entrepreneurialness to them anyway.
Hmm.
Like we raised all of our own funding already, so there was kind of that sense of like, hey, you need to raise whatever you need to get the job done. You need to gather a team, whether that's volunteers or people who work within the organization. So there's already a lot of entrepreneurial behavior, that I had to lean on, which was really helpful. And yeah, and the benefit of working in a, even though it's nonprofit, it still is a large organization that has that structure. So you see kind of like, okay, this is why you have some of that structure for large scale. Now, not don't have to bring all of that with me, but can bring some of those best practices over.
Sure. And now the big one that you're working in right now is Founder's Best Friend. Do you want to kind of touch on that, explain what it is that you're doing nowadays?
Yeah. So yeah, Founder's Best Friend started working with two other guys, and that's kind of Nick and Daniel, and that's where Founder's Best Friend came along. As the three of us really started out wanting to help founders grow, and Nick had put together a framework, a maturity model for how businesses grow, that had kind of developed out of a lot of experience, but also as the three of us were helping businesses grow at different stages. And really, kind of the premise is your stage of growth as a business is determined by the maturity of your core offering. So don't think about like revenue or headcount or EBITDA or all those other things, but really like how mature is your core offer, and
Hmm.
that's going to really determine what growth stage, what to prioritize in your business. And so as we began looking at that, we realized there were two places that founders really just struggled. And so Founder's Best Friend really kind of we pivoted it to focus on, hey, how do we be a best friend for those founders at those two moments of really structuring and forming a core offer and validating it with like actual paying customers. Because if you don't have paying customers, even a few, then you don't yet have a business and you don't even have something you want to try and bring to market. The other moment is when people like would just usually ends up the founders the bottleneck, and whether in sales or fulfillment, and so we're trying to help them operationalize out of being stuck. And so those two moments of when you hit that bottleneck, but even before that, when you're really trying to figure out what is this thing that I sell and how do I package it in a way that makes sense to the people I want to sell it to. So that's really where Founder's Best Friend birthed, and spend, yeah, pretty much all my time for the most part there nowadays. I personally spend more time on the first one of those, the Launchpad one, because that is having walked that journey of working in a large, organization to going kind of fractional consultant to trying to form my own thing to figuring out, okay, what are the offers within that own thing? Having walked that journey, I really empathize with people, especially who are walking that same kind of journey and trying to figure out, okay, I have expertise or I have a solution or I have a thing,
Hmm.
but I'm having trouble selling it or I don't know how to package it. And so I love helping people in that. It's a blast. Again, it comes back to the finding good people who do good stuff. And it's like, okay, how do I help them win?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that from previous conversation that we had is you really brought out this idea that business owners are sometimes so close to the problem, they can't see it clearly, right? And
Right.
and having that best friend that the founder
Mhm.
can reach out to and say, "Hey guys, help," right?
Yeah.
And give someone that opportunity to have that other person to bounce the ideas off from and let that sounding board happen and give enough space that this unbiased third party can say, well, here's how it looks from our perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because it does. It's hard to do that work on your own. Because you're the expert. You know all the things. We call it like the curse of knowledge. Like, and you see that a lot of times from people who, whether they're coming out of the corporate world and they have like all this expertise and experience, or they're starting something new. They're doing a startup, they're building a solution. They still know all about that problem and that solution. But most likely, the person that they want to sell to, the person they want to help, doesn't have all their expertise. That's why they need to hire them. And so it's really, okay, how do we take that superpower that you have? Because having a superpower and knowing how to package and sell that superpower are not the same. And so it really does get to, okay, how do we distill what someone needs to know? Because we make, as humans, we make decisions emotionally and then we
Mhm.
justify them rationally. And so it's like, okay, what is the emotional problem that someone's trying to solve? What's the impact? What's the benefit that they're seeking, and how do we frame what you bring in that way? Because one of the things I see people run into a lot is they see themselves, if they're coming in with like, as from the expert point of view, it's like, oh, I'm the product. It's like, okay, well, if you want to go get a job, then yes, you're the product.
Yep.
But especially like if you're wanting to not get a job but create a business, you aren't actually the product. We need to productize your expertise. And the same thing if someone's doing a startup, a lot of times it's like, oh, my solution is the product. And it's like, no, your solution is good and it's a core piece of it, but we have to package it in a way that people actually understand what they're buying and what outcome they're getting when they buy. So helping them really make that make sense. And putting it in a narrative form, because we all understand the world through the lens of narrative and story. I think about, like, we're recording this as a podcast, and if someone's listening to it right now, they might be driving in a car, and as often happens, someone might cut them off. And depending on your mood, your brain just automatically creates stories. If you're in a good mood, you're like, oh no, they must be in trouble. I hope they get wherever they're going safe. If you're not, if you had a rough day, you're going to create a different story about that person. They're not going to be a good person. They're going to be a terrible person. They're so rude and selfish and whatever, but
Yep.
you don't have to try to do that. Our brains just do that. And so the same thing is true for all of us. When someone encounters your brand, your business, they're going to try to create a story, whether they mean to or not, to make sense of it. And if you can take a proactive approach to narrate that, then you have such a better chance of it resonating and the right person going, oh, that's exactly what I need. That's my story. You're telling my story. I'm in it. And they take action. So,
So,
but
what's that like when you're able to put that together for these entrepreneurs and have them go from confused chaos and problems to, oh my goodness, you tell my story better than I can.
Yeah. No, it's fun. It is, I mean, kind of, I think this is where I really actually enjoy working with people because that, honestly, that process feels like playtime to me because it
Mm,
is just, and I think that's again why I love helping, especially people who come in with expertise, is even figuring out, it's like, hey, what's the thing that just feels easy and almost like play to you that is hugely impactful for other people? That's what you should probably be selling.
mm,
And so it does kind of, it's a very collaborative session. Like, so when we go through Launchpad, it always starts with this long, over 2 hour collaborative session where we really are working through, like, hey, what is this expertise? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Who are you trying to solve for? Why do you want to be the one to solve it? What's that motivation? How are you uniquely better than all the other options? And so there's a lot of dialogue and going back and forth and really talking through, like, different examples and then reflecting that back to them in a filtered and kind of narratively framed way. And yeah, it's an iterative process, and it does. At first, people are like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, that's totally it." Other times, they still want to keep like sticking more in there. It's like, "Hey, we have a one sentence version of this," and then suddenly it's like, "Okay, now we just added 19 adjectives, and like no one can say that in a breath."
right.
So there's an iterative process of like, okay, nope, let's keep taking away here. Same thing with like steps. Like when you think about the process
Hmm.
of someone doing business with you, it's like when you're the expert, you're like, oh yeah, there's like 19 steps. You're like, nope, there's three.
Yeah,
There's how people get started. There's what's the main thing you do, and then there's how it makes their life better. That's the three steps. And that one often trips people up because they're like, no, that's just way too simple. And it's like, again, like we're just trying to engage their emotional brain to go, oh, I do want that. Okay, cool. I'll call or I'll book or I'll sign up or whatever that first step is. And we're
yep.
just trying to make it easy for people. And usually once they see it, it starts to click and they go, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, that represents what I do. It's like, I know. Great. But it is, you just need somebody else, um, you can't usually, I need these things for my own businesses. Like I need to bring other people in, even though I love doing this all day, it's hard for me to do this for my own offers. So it's not whether you're good or bad at it. It really, you need that other person to come alongside.
Totally. So, in the last couple minutes that we have, what piece of advice would you give someone who's either at that startup mode or maybe in the help, I'm stuck in a cage that I built myself mode? One of those two. What would be the piece of advice you'd give to one of those people?
Yeah, no, I think it's honestly, being willing for someone else to speak into that. Because I've talked a lot about kind of people who are coming in new. I just now even thinking of an example of helping this gal. She's a bookkeeper for 20 years and had been selling typical bookkeeping services and was trying to kind of make a shift and was trying to actually kind of level up into more financial guidance. But as we talk through it, it's like, oh, you really enjoy the cleanup. She's like, yeah,
Mm,
I love cleaning up messes. And it's like, okay, other people don't like that. They want to pay someone else. Do you want to just build your business around? Well, could I? Like, do you think I can build a whole business around that? Yeah, you could. People hate it. You love it. They want to give you money for it. That's a business. And so I think sometimes it is just that willingness to let someone reframe what you may already be saying and look at it from a new point of view. And you might be able to build a business that you actually want to own. And that would probably be the second kind of the other side of that coin is I also see a bunch of people who kind of get in this like bigger, better trap of like, okay, more, serve more clients, do more of this. And suddenly it's like they might reach a pretty substantial growth or financial goal, but at substantial cost. And so I really love in that formative stage is like, hey, what's a business you're actually going to enjoy running that like has a purpose and impact, like it leverages the things you love so that you're going to enjoy doing it and it's profitable because we don't, it's like, hey, I have an impact and I like doing it, but I can't pay rent. Okay, that's a problem, like, so it's really like, how do we there? So I think what I would maybe in summary of that, like there is a business that exists out there that employs both like the impact you want to make, the expertise you have, and a sustainable like revenue stream. And that's what I love helping people find is like, okay, where do those all intersect?
Hmm.
And not just revenue, but time and attention, because those are also things we steward. And so really finding like, okay, like let's build a business that you enjoy owning.
Very cool. And how do people get a hold of you? How would they reach out if they're interested, want to learn more, maybe do business with you, something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can find me at foundersbestfriend.com is one easy place. If they have an offer and they're trying to figure out if it is how ready it is, we also have offerreadyscorecard.com. And so that's a place you can go and take an assessment. But yeah, either of those two places. Or they can look up David Daniel on LinkedIn, also an easy place to find me. But
Perfect. Well, sounds good. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and your wisdom with our audience. And to all of our audience at Small Business Big Visibility, be sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode.